The next bit of news is now this is actually a couple of weeks old, but Raven is going into the Impact Hall of Fame. Talking about, I'm trying to think when the first time you would have come into contact with Raven would be.
That was it there. I never ran across him before because he always worked in places like Oregon. And I had heard a lot about Oregon. And did I ever have a desire to go? Well, maybe just to see the West Coast. But and Raven, after I met him, he told me stories about Oregon and and it was a lot like Memphis. They ran the same towns every week. But I never quite got out there, but I read about it, and the miles didn't kill you. I mean, they were kind of short trips, and Raven liked it. I guess business was pretty good when he was out there. But so you want to know? And I ran across him first in TNA. Good guy.
Was he always full of ideas?
Yeah, he always had ideas. But that's what you want guys to have. You want them to have ideas until they, but the ideas have to have some semblance of dollar signs on them. And he did that too. And I think the question you're wanting to ask me is why he never won the TNA championship.
Well, he seemed to be, now this is in the first year or 18 months or whatever, he seemed to be the only good guy who positively affected the weekly pay-per-view buys when TNA was still in the weekly pay-per-view thing. Yeah, I don't think he ever won the title, or at least at the time. And I was wondering why.
Well, I don't know if he affected the pay-per-view buys positively or negatively, because we never got pay-per-view buy rates. We never got them. We would ask Dixie Carter sometimes. We said we just do a pay-per-view, and we'd ask Dixie, how'd the pay-per-view do? And she says it was good. It was up 10% from last time. That tells you absolutely nothing. Because the last pay-per-view could have done $100. So if it's up $10, this time it did $110. It doesn't tell you anything. And she would not get off those buy rates for some reason. You know, you talk about things leaking to the press. If anybody had any secret they wanted to keep, put it in the same safe that Dixie held those buy rates, that nobody would ever hack into that thing, because we just never got it. So for to say that Raven affected the buy rates positively, I can't say that he did, or the other way for it going south. We didn't know. We asked and asked and asked, and we don't have an answer yet.
It's one half correction, I suppose. Raven did actually win the title in 2005. But as far as Raven goes in the early days, do you remember when he got his head shaved? And I think it was Father James Mitchell used the clippers backwards.
Oh my God. I was there in 2005. But I knew his haircut looked a little odd. But how could he use them backward?
He managed it. Instead of the normal way where the blade goes first, he turned it upside down where the blade was going straight down, and then he went like that, and I think it ended up scarring Raven's head.
Okay, instead of going like this, he went like this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Essentially.
I do remember. I think Raven fixed it, I guess, when he went back to the dressing room, or he went to his room that night. I guess he fixed it, but I don't remember a lot of talk about that. Next time I see Jim Mitchell, I'm going to ask him that.
I think Shane Douglas was holding the mirror at the time, I seem to remember. But yeah, I believe, because Raven had very, very nice hair until he got his head shaved, and I believe that he got his head scarred up, and I think he lost a load of hair through that, and it never recovered.
Well, Sorry for Raven. Sorry.
One more brief thing about Raven. Was anybody reluctant for any reason to get behind him in the early days? You know, like he wasn't the championship material in 2003, 2004.
Well, the only thing I really remember about that is it was a political issue for some reason. Somebody didn't much care for Raven because he would try to, and it was out in the open. He would try to lobby Dixie. I mean, just in front of everybody. And I think Dixie, I don't know if she got tired of it or Jeff got tired of it. Vince got, I don't know. But there was some hesitancy about putting the title on him because I think they thought that Raven was so much of a he'd go in business for himself. And I think they thought that if he got the title, then he'd hold them up. I want this, I want this, I want this, unless I won't drop the title. It was a combination of all those things. And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what I'm hearing, or that's what I heard at the time.
We the people!
We're going to go on to Ricky Steamboat's returning to the ring this November at the age of 69. Now, I've got a load written about it. Essentially, he retired in 1994 due to back problems in a match with Steve Austin, Clash of the Champions 28. He came back for a few matches in 2009. He had one in 2010. And then he's retired again now. He's coming back at 69. Now, the reason why this is more newsworthy than it otherwise would be is that his name came up during Ric Flair's last match as his ideal last opponent. Ricky Steamboat just ruled himself out completely. And now he's getting back into the ring, so goodness knows why. But Ricky getting back into the ring at 69.
Mm-hmm. Somebody threw some cash at him to try it. And if he's in good enough shape, and I think Steamboat has stayed in pretty decent shape. But look, he's 69. Give it up. And Flair, what did I say about him a month ago or whenever he had his last match?
I'll give you the quote, shall I? He then added on his podcast, he says some preamble about Ricky Steamboat being in great shape, probably still better than half the wrestlers, that kind of thing. And then he added, Steamboat coming back makes me want to come back again. I went back up to Lincoln and started training again. What else is there to do?
Lincoln, where'd he go to? Lincoln, North Carolina or what?
Nebraska,
Lincoln.
God knows.
I don't know. I don't know what Lincoln means. But he started training. Okay.
Abe Lincoln got some tips.
Yeah, well, he did wrestle a bear, by the way. But I said about Flair a long time ago. I said, "Oh, this is his last match," and they sold out in Nashville, Tennessee, the Civic Center downtown. But I says, "Is that his last match?" I bet it's not. To somebody else throws him some money, and he'll go and he'll try it again. I do think that he wants to die in the ring. I think he'd probably be happy if he just went ahead and died in the ring. But anytime somebody hits an age, and that's what state athletic commissions used to actually be good at, is they didn't let a guy wrestle if he was over 45. They wouldn't let him wrestle, which is the only good thing they ever did, to tell you the truth. But but allowing Flair to get in the ring at 72, which is not only harmful to his health, or could be, and even Steamboat getting the ring at 69, which could be harmful too. Well, the state athletic commissions, they said, no, you can't do it because you're over the age. And I do believe that. Sometimes you got to stop people from themselves. And Flair, because he needs money, or he won't miss a payday, that he wants to go back. And to me, I think it's insulting to the fans. I think you're better off. I think he's better off starting a GoFundMe. I think if he started a GoFundMe, say, give me the money and I won't wrestle again. So I think he would stop from embarrassing himself and embarrassing the fans that went to see him. Seeing Flair in that last match wasn't a good look. Hell, I thought he was going to die at one point. And and I may have said it on this show too, that, he said he didn't remember it because he was passed out, knocked out half the time. I guarantee you he doesn't remember it. I don't know how long the match was, 10 minutes maybe. Well, he don't remember maybe 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of it, and the rest of it to see he was just cloudy and foggy in the corner or wherever he was. Would you
believe it wasn't even 10? It was something like 28. It went forever, and he doesn't remember half of it.
It went out. It went 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think it went over 20 minutes. Yeah, it was very, very slow. There was a lot of not very much action, and then Ric Flair was passed out for quite a few minutes of it.
Well, I didn't know it went 28 minutes, but the fans sitting there watching that, they said, man, they don't want to see him go out like that. It'd have been better if he was in the corner and just went in and, made a big comeback, chop, 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 chop. Everybody hits the floor and he does his strut and everybody's happy. But of course, that wouldn't been his last match.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who laid that match out. I guarantee it wasn't Jeff Jarrett. And it had to be Rick. Because he spent too much time, and they should have let the other guy do the selling and Rick do the comeback.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where even that philosophy came in.
It was 26:40 officially. I want to also bring up something that Ric Flair said, or reiterate, I should say. What else is there to do? That's what he said. I mean, he cannot think of anything else to do with his life than train to wrestle at 73. Now, obviously, he's his own man. He can make his own choices. He's a big boy. But, I mean, as you said, commissions are there to stop people from themselves. But it's very telling when he says, what else is there to do? And it seems just a bit sort of, I don't know, it's very telling.
That's actually sad. I mean, Ric Flair could do a lot of things. What I think he should do is go help some charities. Go help some people who haven't been as fortunate as he's been. Bring attention to them, like orphan kids or abandoned kids or the homeless or the vets. I mean, we got a bunch of people, and I'm sure you have them in the UK too. We have quite a big, not a big proportion of the population, but a lot of people down on their luck. They don't have a place to live. They don't have enough food. The kids are running wild. So I think if he lent his efforts to helping those people, he could get them a lot of publicity, and he could help them. And I think he's been involved in wrestling, and that's all he's ever known is the wrestling business. But he finds it hard to get out of it. Sometimes I heard an old timer told me a long time ago, and Flair is a prime example of it. He said, "It's not how do you get into wrestling, it's how do you get out of wrestling." Because after you've been, and I'm the same way. After you've been exposed and you've done pro wrestling most of your life, doing something else is actually scary. Because if you have to go make a living, you say, I don't know if I can do this.
I've got a tasteless joke. Why doesn't Ric Flair, his charity could be raising awareness for haemophilia, because he blades so much and bleeds a lot.
And that was another thing he shouldn't have done. That was, because you could look at some of those people, and some of them really were scared he's going to make it out in one piece or alive. But what a great story that would have been. I'm saying, what if he'd have died in that match? Now people tell all their stories, but like I said, I think he has a wish, a hidden wish. That's where he goes.
Why is it so hard to get out of wrestling? Is it just the roar of the crowd? Is it the lifestyle?
Well, a lot of times guys make, just a fortune. And if they have to drop out and go do something else, well, they still make good money, but yet they're not making good money. And when they walk into a room, they don't have the spotlight on them. Boom. and the room darkens down and the music plays and you can walk and you have all these thousands and thousands of adoring fans. Hey, we love you, man. They miss that. I've often said that if they could take that feeling, and every wrestler, well, not every wrestler, I'm sure, but every wrestler has felt like being in the spotlight. It's a great feeling. If they could take that feeling and market it in a drug, I mean, it'd be a $1 billion seller, because that feeling cannot be replicated in any other way. I mean, you have to, even race car drivers don't get that because they can't hear the crowd because the car is running. But you walk out into an arena with 20,000 or a stadium of 80,000 people, and you hear that mad scream and rush and roar of the crowd. Yeah, it's exhilarating. And it's, sometimes I think that's where wrestlers get an exalted sense of really who they are. And sometimes that spills over into the dressing room, and that's when they have problems. But, and I think they don't want to get out, they don't want to lose the money. And then they don't want to, now they're living another lifestyle.
We the people.
The next question from Boring Dan. Could you describe what happened backstage between Samoa Joe and Kevin Nash after Joe cut a shoot promo burying Scott Hall for no-showing the TNA Turning Point pay-per-view in 2007? Reports suggest that Nash smacked Joe so hard he knocked him down, then smacked him again for good measure.
Well, Boring Dan, you know, I don't think I could call myself Boring Dutch or Boring James, but Boring Dan has the cojones to say that, okay, here's my question. As a matter of fact, I can't answer that question because I was in attendance that day. I was in TNA, and I forgot what the actual setup was, but Kevin Nash and Samoa Joe, and who didn't show up? What was his name?
It was Scott Hall. He no-showed the event.
I can't. Well, see, I forgot his name from where you mentioned him to now. But anyway, but Scott Hall didn't come. Now listen, we all kind of had it in our heads that, you know, maybe Scott isn't the most reliable guy in the world, but Kevin loved him like a brother, which will tell you why he acted the way he did. So we went out and they left it up to Kevin, and I forgot what they were told to say, but they left it up to Kevin and Joe to kind of send out the message that something happened to Scott and he won't be here today. Well, Kevin did his part first and handed the mic to, he soft soaked it. He like soft sold it. Something happened or this and that. Well, Joe didn't do that. Joe went out there and literally scorched him on the mic. And I'm watching from backstage, or I was around the screen backstage, and I saw Kevin get over. He just eased over to one side of the ring and he's leaning on it like this, like, you don't know what he's thinking. But to myself, I'm thinking, this is not going down too well with Kevin. So they leave the ring. Kevin didn't say another word in the ring. And I like Joe and I like Kevin. So they both come back, and I wasn't there, but I heard this about 10 minutes after it happened. Kevin walked up to him, and it was like, you know, you have these big buildings, Studio A, Studio B, C, and D. Well, they were out like in the middle of all four of them, and they had a little bit of a crowd around them, and Kevin just asked him, what the hell was that? And I think Samoa Joe, he said something like, well, he's not here. I'm not taking the heat from, or something. I don't know what he said. Don't quote me on that. And all of a sudden, Kevin just open hand slapped him across the face, which, of course, alerted everybody that, hey, this is, they're not getting along down there. And I don't think he knocked him down. I didn't hear he knocked him down. But then he got up, and I think then Joe realized, hey, man, maybe I shouldn't have said it. And he may have tried to even tell Kevin he was sorry. He didn't realize that it came across like that. And he could have been legitimately sorry. And I don't know if he slapped him again. He could have. But that's what I heard. But I think, and the reason I said that Kevin loved Scott like a brother, now we can understand his reaction to what Joe had said. But I think it was left that day that Joe shouldn't say anything about Scott anymore on a live mic. So, and that was the way it was left. Nothing else was said. Nothing else was done. It happened. We moved on.
They both say that they're friends now, but when that happens and Scott Hall
and possibly that's true.
Yeah. When that happens on the day Scott Hall no shows, I mean, as you said yourself, you're half expecting him not to turn up. But I mean, is your allegiance with Kevin Nash for defending his friend, or is your allegiance with Samoa Joe for actually being truthful with the fans and lambasting Scott publicly?
Well, I didn't have an allegiance. It was one of those things that happened. I can't say that Kevin was justified in slapping a coworker, and I can't say that Samoa Joe was right in blasting Scott. It was one of those things that you don't foresee coming, and all of a sudden it's on top of you. So, but nothing happened to either one of them. I think they moved on, and as you just mentioned, they're friends now. I think they are friends because I think there's a lot of mutual respect between them. But at the time, Scott was really having a hard time, and Kevin had worked really, really hard to get him into TNA. He actually kind of pushed for him and used his influence within the company to help Scott out, because Scott, he made a lot of money, but he may have spent a lot of money too. Mm-hmm. And he may have needed to go back to work. And then all of a sudden, I don't think anybody felt worse about it than Kevin, because Kevin was the one who went to bat for him. And then he left his friend hanging. But I think it's all water over the dam now. And so they're friends. So I'm glad for it.
We the people.
It is the craziest / oddest places you've ever wrestled. Do you want me to read the list, or you can remember the list? I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember the list. I'd have to think about it.
Okay.
Read the list.
Okay, NASCAR racetracks, big truck, exhibitions, state fairs, county fairs, prisons twice, sleaze bars, churches, high and junior high gyms, National Guard armories, a barge in Miami in Biscayne Bay, porno theaters, in front of a percussion orchestra in a performing arts center, rodeos at a soccer stadium in Trinidad, auto sales lots, Madison Square Garden, and NFL stadiums. Now, porno theaters.
Yep. It was just a theater that's years and years ago. It was, I think, about to shut down. It wasn't very big, and they threw a ring up there on the stage. And nothing was playing when we were there, but that's what the theater was used for.
Sticky floors.
And it was, oh my God, it was a horrible part of town. I couldn't wait to get out of there. And we had, it was just really sleaze all the way through. I don't know who booked me there. The other thing we got booked in, not only once, but twice, was 2 prisons. One was a federal, Atlanta Federal Penitentiary in Atlanta, and they put it out on the baseball field. And, like prisoners don't have nothing else to do, I guess. So I guess they just come out there and watch what we were doing. But I looked up, and it was baseball stands. And there was this one guy sitting up there all by himself, and he's reading the book or he's reading the paper or something. Nobody was around him. Nobody. He had the whole corner of the top grandstand up there. And I asked one of them, and you don't have guards with you. You have trustees. The guards are up in the towers. I'm thinking, well, hey, if these prisoners want to riot, they just got us. These trustees are not going to fight them. They got to live with them. So, but I asked who that guy was, and they said he was one of the top members of the Miami Mafia. I think his name was Trafficante. If you look the name up, I mean, he was a big deal. And of course, I didn't know who they were talking about, but I knew that him sitting up there by himself, people left him alone. Then the other one we had to make was a maximum security prison in Kentucky. I've had a lot of shit happen to me in Kentucky. Stopped by cops, going back to a prison. Man, you walk in, you smell a disinfectant because there's so many people there, and they search your bag, and then they put you on a conveyor belt, and you walk literally 12 feet, 15 feet, and they open the door and close it back. They search your bag again. They just searched it twice. Now they're going to search it again. Now it was going to where we had to go, and we were going to like a little basketball indoor gymnasium, and nobody was there till like 2:00. So when they rung the bell, here they come. And the place filled up. Now, keep in mind, I've never been in jail. I've never been in prison. So all this was new to me. So I look out there. You talk about segregated. That prison was, you see the Aryan Nation, the white gang over here. Then you see the black gang in the opposite corner over there. Then you see the Hispanic gang over here. And then you see the bad guys, the really bad guys, they're all huddled up. Then you see all the gay guys that are over there out of the way. And I'm looking out there and I see this guy, he's about 6'9" and long hair and had sunglasses on. For what, I don't know. We were inside and it was cold that day. So I asked one of the trustees there, I said, hey, and I would point a guy, what's he in here for? Oh, he's in here for armed robbery. What's he in here for? Oh, he stole a car. He robbed a bank or whatever. But I saw this guy. I said, what's he in here for? He said, oh, boy. They said one day he was a motorcyclist. He was a motorcycle gang guy. And his bike broke down and a guy picked him up. And there was a bike dealer, a parts place in town. So they called the guy up and got him to open it up. It's like 10 o'clock at night. And he got his part. And then he shot the guy in the store, then shot the guy driving the car. So then he went out there, got back in the car, drove it, fixed his bike, and then drove off and then went somewhere else and killed 3 or 4 more other people. So he killed about 6 people in a period of 2 or 3 hours. And he says that nobody even talks to him in the prison because his reputation is that bad. And I said, well, don't introduce me to him because I don't know him. But the wildest thing about that is the heels are the baby faces. And the baby faces are the heels. They hate the good guys, but they love the heels.
Just like Canada.
Well, I guess, but if I'd have went out there and I was wrestling the Fantastics, they were used to being cheered. They were booing the shit out of them, and they were all my fans. They said, kick his ass, Dutch. They said, throw him out here. We know what to do with him. And he was getting mad. So I put a stretch on him, and I reached down, I was grabbing the rope, but then I'd reach down and I'd pull his trunks up. Oh my God, they went nuts. I mean, that would just excite him, I guess. I don't know. And I said, now, Tommy kept saying, I'm leaving. I said, well, leave. I don't give a shit. If you want to leave, go back to the dressing room. Then I said, you better have that trustee going with you. They may snatch your ass. But anyway, we spent about 3 hours there that day, which was 2 hours and 55 minutes more than I want to spend. And then we got back in the car and we left. I said, I never want to go back. And I went back to the owner I was in Memphis. It was Jerry Jarrett. And I said, thank you very much for booking me in a hellhole that I never want to go back to. No, he thought it was kind of funny, but it was a good experience. Not a bad one, but I don't want to do it again.
What was the payoff?
Well, that one, I don't know, it wasn't bad. It's about $500.
Oh, that's not too bad.
That's not too bad. And it was a double shot. Then I would go to Louisville. And so I picked up, I made about $750, $800 that day.
Not bad, not
And
bad.
that was when it was, the business was good though.
I've got to pick up a couple more here. So there's, you mentioned like state fairs, county fairs, National Guard armories, that kind of thing. A few that I want to just make mention of. A NASCAR racetrack. Now, some of these you can house like 200,000 people in. I mean, did they have to have like...
not that big. No, it was like NASCAR race there. They helped sponsor the track. They wasn't their track, but they had NASCAR drivers there. But this is what they did. They put me, a ring on the back of an 18-wheeler, just the frame. And they would put the driver in there and we'd get in, they'd introduce us. And what we had to do, we started wrestling. And we would go all the way around the track, first turn, go down the back stretch, and then come around to the final turn. And then wouldn't you know it, that the match would end right when we got right back in front of the middle of the stands. I wrestled Dirty White Boy, and we got on the back stretch, and he was beating the shit out of me because they had beer in the dressing room. Well, he was about drunk. He was beating the shit out of me. I said, God damn, loosen up. You're killing me. He said, it's good for the business. I said, shit. I said, the only one that knows you're doing it is me. They're too far away to see, so stop it. So we got back around, and this is also where I did this twice, but they had a race. They wanted the wrestlers to race each other. And they asked me, do you want to drive a car? I said, hell no. I didn't even drive up here. I'm damn sure not going to drive around the track. But I said, he will. And that was Undertaker. He was Mark. And Mark said, yeah, I'll drive. So when they took us out on the track, he was going to race Kerry Von Erich. So, and I asked the guy, I said, which one of these cars, and they had two cars that they picked. Which one of these is the fastest? He said, tell him to get in a black car. I said, okay. And then Mark came. I said, Mark, he said, the black car is stronger. He said, okay. So, boy, when they give him time to go, that Undertaker, he showered down on it. But he got to that second turn, and he spun around. And then he was beating Kerry at that time. Kerry hit him in the back with the car, not really hard. Then went up there. He got out of his car, pulled Undertaker out, slammed him, got back in his car, and beat and won the race. I said, "Damn, I've never seen that finish before." But I said it was pretty good. Whose idea was that? He said, "Hell, it was Kerry." I said, "Okay."
Just two more that I'll pull up. Performing in front of a percussion orchestra. So what, were they playing the music while you were wrestling?
Well, it's percussion is drums. They had a drill about anything that's made a percussion. It was drums, and they beat logs, and that's on YouTube, by the way. It's and I wrestled Jeff Jarrett. You can go to YouTube and look it up. And that was the match they put in the Smithsonian Institute as a part of the some Tales of the Prairie or something. But it's a permanent fixture in the Smithsonian Institute. And I think that me and Sir Jeffrey were the only wrestlers in the Smithsonian Institute, unless they put Hogan or somebody else in there.
Now, you've claimed you've been in the Smithsonian Institute in 1971 after you wrestled like 6 matches, didn't you? One was a bear, one was a woman.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you actually meant it then, but you actually are.
No, I am. You can look at you, and I tell you what I do. Next time we do this, I will bring the official letter.
I tell you what, if we can find the match, we'll watch it and comment on it. And the last one, barge in Biscayne Bay.
Well, I've told that story that they have trouble with a building or something, athletic commission. So they said, okay, we'll just go around it. And somebody had an idea. Hey, you could put a ring on that barge out there, push it out a little bit, so you're off land. Therefore, you're not under their jurisdiction. And you can have your matches, and we can put 500 fans on it or whatever. And that's what they did. Then I ended up going into the bay. Hey, I've wrestled some crazy places, really.
We the people.
We're doing a new show, I am, with Vice. and this is called the Territories. And it's really, they're doing it in conjunction with The Rock and Dwayne Johnson. And this is something they delve into, and a lot of new fans have heard about, but they didn't know how it was constructed or how it worked. But, and we'll just go into that. When I got into the business, it wasn't called companies, or it was called territories. And every area of the United States, especially along the East Coast, had a wrestling territory associated with it. Like Florida was Florida Championship Wrestling, and they just worked in Florida. And then Georgia Championship Wrestling, they just ran the cities in Georgia. Then you had Mid-Atlantic, which took into both Carolinas and Virginia. And then, of course, you had WWF up in New York, and they covered Baltimore and New York City and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Boston. And that was a really high-paying, actually high-drawing territory because of the population. But a lot of people don't know about that. Then they had Tennessee, and they had Texas, and they had Kansas City and Oklahoma. But if you watch this show, and what I'm doing part of the narration on it, especially between segments. And I think it's going to be very enjoyable. I don't know when it's going to start on Vice, but we'll keep you tuned on that. But for those who have an historical view of the wrestling business, this is a way to get reassociated with it. But even if you go on Twitter, nobody talks about the territories except the old timers, and they talk about it. But if you don't know what that means, this series they'll kind of break it down for you. But it's old stories and how the territory started and what they were famous for and this, that, and the other. And like I think they're doing Puerto Rico too, and they will cover the Bruiser Brody incident on that one. And then Tennessee, they talk about the old timers who ran around there. Interesting series. And what I like about it is, even if you're a newcomer as a fan, you kind of realize the history behind pro wrestling. And even if you're an old time fan, you'll hear some things that you've never heard before, and it's enjoyable. So look forward. It's on Vice, coming up, I think, in October, and I will keep you updated on that.
So you actually mentioned this to me, I think, after we stopped recording a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't get to ask you a ton of questions about it, but when do you start? Have you already started working on it? What are you going to have, narration roles and on-screen roles? Are you a consultant? All those questions. But have you already done work for them so far?
Oh, yeah. Well, I did I guess they call it the ins and outs between some segments, or the end of the show. I would say, like, don't miss Vice next week, and we're talking about Calgary, Alberta, the territory. But I actually have an on-screen part in that when they did Memphis. And the Memphis characters they have on there was me and Jerry Lawler, Jerry Jarrett, who owned the territory, Jeff Jarrett, who's Jerry's son, and Jimmy Hart. And we sit around a table and we talk. And of course, they take that back and they edit it while rolling footage in. And they have a lot of footage from Memphis that they don't have to rely on, say, WWE to supply it. They have and Jim Cornette probably had most of that footage anyway. And the thing about, and you may not even know this, the thing about the Memphis footage, nobody knows who owns that. A clear license to Memphis footage has not been determined, because like Channel 5 of Memphis, I think they claimed they owned it. And then Jerry Jarrett claimed he owned it, and he did, but at one point he sold it. And so nobody knows. It's actually a territory without an owner, a territory without a home.
Do you remember shortly before he died, Corey Macklin? He was an announcer in the late 90s for Memphis.
I know.
He claimed he owned it when he didn't, and then he sold the rights to some like High Spots or something for $20,000. Then before they could get the money back, he died.
Well, I don't know how he determined he owned it, but he could. Everybody else says it too. So Corey was well in his rights, I think, to say he owned it. But that is actually a story in and of itself, because I don't understand it, and I don't think anybody else understands it. I don't even think a court of law would understand it. But because I'm going way in the past. Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler got together and they sold their rights to the footage to this group out of Ohio. And I forgot this guy's name, but it was like $1 million. And this guy named Larry Burton, who is the super villain in this, and that wasn't even his name. Nobody ever really knew his name. But he sold it. He was the go-between guy, and it got all messed up. I don't know. The guy sued back. The guy who bought it. He sued Lawler and Jarrett, and I don't know if they made restitution or it got dropped or whatever. I never heard any more about it. So I might need to check into that and see how that ended up.
Yeah, we discussed that on 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, I can't remember, on maybe the last show, the sale of USWA to Larry Burton / Larry Bertrand / whatever other names. A couple more things about Vice, the new Vice series. Were you a consultant on the series, and when and where did you film your parts?
I guess I was a consultant and a talent on it. And the only reason I did it this time, because Vice is in Canada, and they have a rule that you can't work on their shows. I mean, as a or whatever, you got to be Canadian, because they're very nationalistic there. People talk about the United States doing that, but Canada in Vice, it's a state-owned PBS channel. Really, basically, what it is. That's who's partners with Vice for this show. But I guess they kind of let up on their requirements. So I did that. I worked for them, and I did it at a studio somewhere close to the Atlanta airport is all I know. And they just flew me in, and I stayed one night at the airport, got up next day. They had a car waiting for me, took me to the studio. Then when I finished, I got back at the studio, went back to the airport and left. But they're doing Memphis, they're doing Florida, they're doing Mid-Atlantic, they're doing WWF, they're doing Texas, they're doing Calgary with the Harts. They're doing that, and I don't know what else they're doing. I think they're actually doing Puerto Rico, except for that last show with Bruiser Brody on Vice. That may have cooked them of Puerto Rico working for him, because that series kind of indicted all of them down there. So they may be a little ticked off about that. But I think it's really going to be a really, really good series, enjoyable to watch. And instead of, bad endings, I think they have some stories that, are funny, and just things that happened about how it started and how it ended.
Yeah, I like the Dark Side of the Ring series because it was accessible. You did not have to be a big fan. It's the kind of thing you could sit there and watch with a non-fan, your partner, let's say,
Yep.
and they wouldn't walk out of the room, because it was all about the human interest stories that are universal, not just in wrestling.
Oh, it was good, because you didn't have to be a fan, because they would start you on this story, and it's like watching a crime story. Well, this guy had did this, and they just bring you into it. And then before you know it, you're kind of invested into the story. And they will top the story off. They'll give you a finish to it, and then they'll go on, and next week they have a different story. I really enjoyed. I think they did Vice. I think they did it well. And now I'm looking, and I'm seeing there's a bunch of other shows saying the dark side of this and the dark side of that. I went, well, what the hell? And my guys, Evan and James, I think his name is. I mean, they started a run of that they get no credit for, but it's the dark side of automobile racing and the dark side of baseball umpiring. I didn't know it had a dark side, but they're telling me, and if it was baseball umpiring, I got to see what that is.
We the people.
One time in WWE, they told me to take the bullwhip to the ring with me. I said, "Are you sure?" They said, "Yeah, take it to the ring with you." Vince said that. So I go out there with that bullwhip, and I didn't open it up to the very end, because I put it in a paper bag and left it in the corner, and I pulled it out, and then I cracked it, and the people, whoa, they straightened up, and it was for Rusev, Miro, and I told him, "You get in my face one more time," I said, "I'm going to beat you like a 1,200-pound bull. I'm going to break you down like a 410 shotgun or something like that." Brother, I got back to the dressing room. Corporate was already calling. Tell Zeb he can't use it. Whose idea was that? Blah, 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 blah. And then they told me that night, okay, you can't use the bullwhip anymore. And the reason they couldn't crop it out, it was a live show. So they left it in, but corporate went crazy because they was afraid of getting caught up in the racism deal, and it was 12 Years a Slave coming out and some other movies coming out. So the next week I went out on the show. I never forget this. And I looked at Vince. I said, "Hey, Vince, what do I say about the bullwhip?" He says, "Just pretend it never happened." So I walked out there and nothing else was said about it. But corporate went crazy. I mean, those phones all the agents were coming to me. "Why'd you take that whip out there?" I said, "Well, why don't you ask Vince? He's the one who told me to do it. I mean, I just work here, man. Don't y'all get the same directions I do or what?" So, but anyway, it was like, there's probably a 2-day, windfall over it, or, a furor over me taking the bullwhip out there. But they told me to do it, so I did it.
How long did it take you to perfect the whip action?
It took me a while, because if you don't know about a whip, you beat the shit out of yourself more than you don't do anything else. Finally, a guy showed me. He said, "Listen, when you throw it out, don't pull it back like it's a fishing rod. You go back and," said, "you let it out, then you have it crack, which kills its own power. Then it drops. Then you can go at it again." Took me about a month to learn that. And I was beating the crap out of myself. Because can you imagine getting hit with a bullwhip? I mean, it hurts. It really does. So, but some guys are so good at it. I got a ring in Memphis one night. Phil Hickerson was my opponent, and he had a baseball cap on, and I'm playing. I threw it at him, and it hit the tip of his cap, pow, and knocked the cap off. People went, and he went like this, whoa, because he heard it pop right there. And then when it went off, the fan said, "Damn, that's pretty damn accurate." So, but bullwhip was always good if you had a feud to settle with the guy, or he'd punched too hard, or he was a little too stiff. And it didn't take much of a pop from a whip to straighten him out. And they would jump. And then the best way to throw a whip, you throw it behind them, it pops, it kills the power, and it moves so fast. What makes it pop is it's traveling faster than the speed of sound. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then it's sonic, pow. Then you pull it back. I didn't know that. I had to whip 10 years. Somebody told me. And I said, I didn't know that. And they said, oh, yeah.
There you go. It is a, I'm just reading it there. When a section of the whip moves faster than the speed of sound, creating a small sonic boom. There you go.
That's what there it is. And then I bet a lot of people listening to this, the same way as a belt, you pop a belt or you pop anything, a rope. But when it pops, that means at that particular instant in time, it's traveling faster than sound. Mm-hmm. You see how scientific we are and how many interesting things people learn that and just listening to us.
I saw that on Mythbusters. That's how I know that fact. If you ever watched Mythbusters back in the day.
Oh, what Busters?
Mythbusters. Did you never see it? I loved it. It was on Discovery.
I probably seen it at a time too. Mythbusters, yes. Yeah. Good show.
We the people.
Kev Jordan asks, during your first WWF run in the mid-1990s, did you ever remember hearing about the rumours regarding the supposed real reason Macho Man Randy Savage left the WWF in late 1994? Randy was having a tryst of sorts, this is the rumour, with Vince McMahon's then 18-year-old daughter, Stephanie. Now, this is a rumour that apparently came out many years afterwards, and God knows how it got started.
A rumour? They had rumours in WWE?
Would you believe it?
Really? Would you believe it? No, that wasn't a rumor. It was basically, if I can say this, it was more or less accepted as fact. Because who said that if you say it enough, that the rumor becomes the fact?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they have done that because it was repeated over and over and over and over again. But at the end, I think Randy and Vince, I think before Randy went to WCW, I think that kind of bothered Vince on a personal level. And he got mad at Randy. And that's why that they said Randy would never, ever be in the Hall of Fame. That changed later on. But it wasn't just a rumor. It was really an accepted almost statement of fact that Randy had been told or advised, not by Vince, but by, say, Pat or some of the agents there, Chief, to kind of stay clear of Stephanie. And why, I don't know. She may have said something like she likes him and he got back to Vince. Well, Vince, knowing what goes on between males and females, maybe wanted to protect his little daughter, which I don't blame him for that. But I think Randy did cross the line. I think he did cross the equator, and he may have dallied a little bit with Stephanie. Can I say it was true? No, I can't say it was true. It was just given as, and you can call it a rumor, but I've always heard that story. But I never really asked Savage about it. I wish I had him now. Mm. But by the time that it was going on, I wasn't in the same area as Randy, and I was good friends with Randy, but I never asked him. I could still ask Lanny, but I think Lanny would just give me what he wants to give me. But there's no need to hide it anymore. I mean. But I did hear that, not only as a rumor, as a fact. And yes, it was commonly accepted backstage.
Just to harp on it slightly more, did you hear this when you got to the WWF in 1995, or is this something you heard many years later?
No, I heard it there. It was, but I think Randy was actually still there when I got there.
There was a few months between you, so I think Randy left around September 94. I think you got there maybe January 95.
Yeah, that's when I got there.
We the people!
Well, we have some people who have written in for questions, as they always have, and the first one is Mark in Saigon, which I've actually been to a few and
yes,
so have
I
you.
Have. Yep. I've been there. So what do you say?
Well, it's funny. We've both been Saigon in different decades and for different reasons. Hi, guys. Love the podcast. Given all the talk recently of booking, I'd be interested in hearing what you think the requirements are for being a good booker and who you would consider to be/have been one.
Well, anybody, and I've actually thought about this question. Anybody can be a booker. Anybody. If you get somebody said, okay, you're the booker, you could be 14 years old and you can be a booker. And you said, all right, this is the first thing we're going to do. Dutch, you're working with James. So tonight, I want you to go in there and hit him in the head with a 2x4 and leave him laying. Okay, boom. That's it. That's an angle. But the next week, he's thinking, oh, now what do we got to do to follow up on that? It's not the first step. It's the second step. So I go in the ring and you say, okay, James, tonight Dutch is in a match. I want you to go in the ring and hit him in the head like he did you last week with a 2x4 and leave him laying. But now, guess where we are? We're back where we started. But that is booking. So the third week, we guys have a match and it's a double pull apart. We're still like where we were. Nothing has advanced. So, and then the fourth week, they put us in like street fight or whatever, but they've already seen it. But I mean, anybody can be a booker. It's the artistry behind the booking is what counts. So, and I think we talked last week about the angle between Matt, two names, Matt Riddle and Seth Rollins. And if you told me in the email that I have been advocating, I like that word, advocating for this approach for months, and I have. They told a story, and now if creative doesn't get too aggressive and let it take its own natural course, because they book from pay-per-view to pay-per-view, basically. So the pay-per-view being the big show, what used to be what we would say a big show, we didn't have pay-per-view years ago. We just went to a bigger building. So that was an upgrade. We could draw more people. We could make more money. That's what a pay-per-view is. And now they're booking like that, which makes sense. Now, where did I learn booking, making sense, and telling a story? Well, from Jerry Jarrett is one. He was the old Memphis booker, and he learned it from somebody too. He learned it from one of the Fullers who owned the territory years before. And then Jerry Lawler took over, and I watched him too. It was a different style of booking, but both were successful. Like in Memphis, especially, Lawler would book 6 months, and Jarrett would book 6 months, which I thought was really a beautiful thing because they didn't have time to burn out. I mean, they had the same talent. All they did was just step in. And Lawler liked to book in the spring and summer. You know why?
No.
It's not football season.
Oh.
He's a huge Cleveland Browns football fan, so he don't want to be bothered with booking and trying to run a territory during football season. He was too busy following the Cleveland Browns. And I learned a lot from Jerry Jarrett. I learned a lot from Lawler because he learned it from Jerry. I learned a lot from an old-time booker named Tom Renesto, who was one of the original assassins, who I was his driver. And we would ride up and down the road, a brilliant man. I would talk to him, great talker, and he would tell me, I mean, he didn't teach me this, and this. He would just talk. And I would have to piece in the pieces. I knew what he was talking about. Eddie Graham's another, and I think we covered this last week, or some great bookers. Bill Watts. Bill Dundee is a good booker. And Ken Mantell, who's I'm not related to. He's the one who got Texas up and moving.
You know how many questions I get? Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. You know how many questions I get asking if you're related to Ken Mantell?
Really?
Yeah, that's like the most asked question I receive. I never ask it you.
Well, I'm not related to him. And to add to that answer, he's called a plastic brother. See what I mean? I'm not really related to him, but it's a name.
Yeah.
A plastic brother. So, but I'm not related to him. I'm not related to, actually, Mantell's not even my name, and Mantell's not even his name. His real name is Ken Lusk. And my name is not Mantell. So we both got the names from I don't know where he got the name. But I'm going back to booking, but Eddie Graham was a great booker. George Scott was a great booker. And there's probably been a few more. Buddy and Ron Fuller, great bookers. But I think booking is not necessarily learned, as it's like breathed. You breathe it. You kind of understand it automatically. It's storytelling and using live play figures. It's what it is. And back in the days when I was actively wrestling, if a booker gave me an interview, he wouldn't tell me to say this, and this. He'd say, you're working with James Monday in a certain type of match. Go out there and sell some tickets. That's what he'd say. And I'd go out there and it would be my promo about you, and I would make it as personal as I could. Then if you'd listen to it, you'd have to answer it. And then we'd do it like that. We did it the old time way. And I've never heard of a school I've heard of a wrestling school. I've never heard of a booking school because there is no such place. You can learn, it's like creative writing. If you can write, you can write. You can make grammatical mistakes and spelling mistakes. But if you tell a good story, people overlook that. In their head, they're envisioning your story that you're telling, which is the same way with wrestling. You're just using live characters and a TV screen to tell your story. Mm-hmm. So booking is not that hard. It's common sense, basically. Tom Ernesto used to tell me years ago, it's common sense. Don't do anything too far advanced for your audience, and make it so a 10-year-old kid can understand it. Then you got a good story.
And the difference, very quickly, the difference between a booker and a writer is?
Oh, tons. A writer writes for a specific segment on TV. Writers aren't bookers. Bookers say, okay, we're doing an angle between Dutch and James. We need an interview for James out here. He's going to face Dutch in some kind of match. Well, the writer, he pencils that out. It's the shits. You could do much better on your own, which is what I think Triple H is going to do now. He's going to let guys more or less, like free rap. You know what free rap is?
Freestyle.
Yeah, freestyle. He's going to freestyle the interview because they're not doing it live most of the time anyway. They're doing it in the back. So let them free rap it and see what happens. It can't be any worse than what some of those writers come up with. These writers don't even understand wrestling. They don't even understand being in a fight. And they don't understand this character would say this, but this character would say that. See, what I used to bitch all the time about, not bitch, like out in the middle of the hallway screaming. I said, give me the same writer every week. And no, because Vince disagreed with that. Because he said, if a writer can write for me, he can write for Kane too, or he can write for Undertaker, or he can write. No, he can't. It's a different mindset, especially my character. I mean, you could kind of get Kane's character, and you can kind of get Undertaker's character, what they will say and what they won't say. They're not men of words. They're men of actions. So, but Rock used to tell them, I'm not doing this. Or Stone Cold, I'm not doing this. That's not me. And they'd go to Vince. Of course, Vince is going to agree with them. And I don't know why a writer would subject himself to coming into a test of who's right and who's wrong with The Rock on one hand and Stone Cold on the other. Who's going to win? The money, people that are drawing the money, not the writers. They're expendable. Hell, they could walk out the door right now. But Rock and Stone Cold, no, they can't. So, but the writers, if you had the same one kind of writing, and all you need to write for these guys, they write for themselves. They do these interviews all day long in their heads, driving to the town, going to the town, in the rooms. They're doing an interview in their head. How am I going to get this rock? What should I say here? And they get it. They get in front of a mirror. You can tell Rock, he's in front of a mirror. He's doing it because they understood that we're entertainers. I mean, we're physical entertainers. There's no other business like it in the world. See, stuntmen, they get multiple takes. We don't. We get one take, and if it don't work, well, it just looks like crap. And if it looks like crap, it's up to one of the performers to immediately seize that it looked like crap and keep going. It's a unique business, but a booker, getting back to my point, a booker lays the timeline out. He said, I want this to start here, and I want to kind of wrap it up at the pay-per-view. Except I never did that. I would take it at the start, and I would put a big match here, look like it's wrapping up, but it didn't wrap up. I kept talking about it, and then I would leave it alone for 2 weeks and come back to it. Because I always found out one thing, fans do not forget. Why would you go from a sellout? These two guys sold out, and you had a finish, kind of ended it, but they're still interested in it. So why not restart it again and milk it for everything it's worth? And the fans will tell you when they're done with it. So just listen to the fans. Anyway, that's my theory.
We the people.
Next story is the death of Antonio Inoki. Now, I believe that you went to Japan for 3 different tours. One was for the UWF. Another one was for All Japan. I don't know if you did 2 or 1 of each of those or for another company, but did you ever even meet Inoki?
I met him one time, just one time. And all I did, shake his hand, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know how fluent he is in English. I wasn't around him that long, but I met him once. Pretty good sized guy, really, for a Japanese guy. And one of the tours I made in Japan, it was for a shoot group, but they didn't tell me it was for a shoot group. Well, they didn't even tell me after I got over there. I just had to find out myself. But it wasn't a total shoot group. It was like they just beat the shit out of me. I come back from the ring one night and I told one guy, I said, damn, these guys can't work worth a damn. Man, the guy said, work? He said, this is like a 3/4 shoot group. I said, what? They said, they didn't tell you that? I said, no. Because I tell you what, I've been in easier street fights, really. And I thought to myself, I could have won some of those fights had I known I was in one. I didn't even know I was in one. But I think their lead guy was Maeda. And man, there's a tape. You can still see it on the internet. I wrestled him. And it's a crazy day. I was tired as a son of a gun when I got there because I flew from Nashville to Los Angeles, hung around a couple hours, and the flight was like at 2:00 in the afternoon. Okay, so we get on the flight, and I had first class because I requested first class. I don't know why. I said I go back to my original premise. What can they do? The worst they can say is no. So they put me in first class. So I flew first class over and back, by the way, in first class. And we landed we left at 2:00 p.m. and we landed in Tokyo at 2:00 p.m. I went, wait a minute. Did time stand still? Of course it didn't, but we chased the sun all the way across the Pacific. But they told me, okay, when you land now, we'll take you to the hotel and you can rest up. Okay, that's what they told me. But no, they said, we got TV tonight. And I'd been up already probably 18 hours. So we get in the car, drive through that Tokyo traffic. Tokyo's got like 30 million people living there. It's unbelievable. And we get to the building about 6 p.m. after, going through customs and all that. And then, of course, now they have TV that night, and I'm so tired. And I'm wrestling Maeda that night in the last match on the TV. And I walk out there, I could barely walk. I'd been up over 24 hours without sleep, maybe a little bit on the plane. And then I got in a ring with Maeda, and you can still find that on the internet too. And I think the last kick he gives me was a spinning heel kick and maybe a back suplex. Anyway, it knocks me out. And you can, if you watch the tape long enough, you can see that he finally comes over and checks on me, see if I'm still alive. And I'll never will forget the tour is these guys go out there and they'll beat the living crap out of you. Of course, they expect you to beat the living crap out of them. But, beating up somebody is a lot of hard work. Really, you get tired beating them up. And then they come back after they have literally beat you half to death, and they're so nice. You can't get mad at them. They say, "Oh, thank you very much, thank you." And what are you going to say? Yeah. And of course, I did it too. Oh, thank you. I was actually thanking myself that the match was over, so I could get out of there. But I did enjoy the tour, a lot of traveling, and you do see a lot of Japan. You go to a lot of the back cities, the back towns that are not very big. And I didn't know this, but the Mafia runs a lot of that wrestling over there.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. I needed to know it. Because all the Mafia guys, and I kept wondering, these Mafia guys are all in the suits. They got the sunglasses on, and they're standing around like this. But some of them are missing fingers. I asked somebody, I went, "Hey, let me ask you something. Why are those Japanese guys missing all those fingers?" They went like that. They said, "It's the Mafia." I said, "What?" "Oh, yeah, the Mafia runs this." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "That Mafia guy now, if he messes up really, really bad, they'll cut one of his fingers off." "Really?" And I saw one guy with 3 fingers missing. I said, "Man, he's really a screw up if he had 3 fingers missing." But what they do, they go to these towns, and the attendance is great, but they go to these towns and they sell tickets to the merchants. And the merchants, and they make them buy full value for the tickets, and then they'll sell them to their customers. So you go to a little town in the middle of nowhere, and you walk in there, and there's 3,000 people sitting in like a high school gymnasium, and no chairs. They have no chairs. And I don't think very few bleachers. I don't remember a lot of bleachers either. And the people sit on the floor. And you walk out there, and the people are just almost deathly quiet. And it's unnerving, really. You say, "Wait a minute. These people are just looking at me." And they only respond if something happens, like a big slam. Ooh, they'll get up for that. Or a punch. Whoa. And the rest of the time, like if you got a baby face down beating the crap out of him, they won't say anything. But when he comes back, then they respond. It's a different world. It's a totally different world.
We the people.
In your opinion, this is Michael Greer, excuse me, who was the least believable wrestler, and why was it Greg Gagne?
Well, I knew Greg Gagne's name was going to come up in there, but Greg Gagne looks like Lou Thez compared to the guy I'm going to mention. And his name is George Goulas. The world's, not possibly, but definitely the world's worst professional wrestler. And he was Nick Goulas, and let me tell you why. Because Nick Goulas, and he was a big gangly thing too. He was like 6'5", but the most uncoordinated human being you can imagine. Now, he played basketball, and to play basketball, you got to be coordinated. He was horrible at basketball too. Oh, he could shoot a few shots, and but other than that, he was terrible in the ring. He had no shoulders. He had legs and ass, mostly is what he got. No chest, no shoulders, no arms. His body looked like it started like at the midway point of the belt line. His legs were okay, but the top and his face, I mean, it wouldn't incite fear in a 3-year-old kid. I mean, he didn't look the part. He didn't look tough. He didn't talk tough because he had a lisp. And when he did interviews, you could hear his lisp. And he didn't sound threatening or any. He was the world's worst. When I first went to work in Tennessee, they put me against George, and I said, I can't work with this guy. Well, he's the owner's son. His owner was Nick Goulas. That was his son. I said, I don't care if he's Nostradamus' son. I don't care, because not only I said he's not over, and he's going to make sure that I won't get over. And I raised enough hell against him. So when I would go in the ring a few times, I worked for him about maybe twice. I just beat him up. I would hit him hard, not really, really hard, but I was, and he'd look at me like, oh man, that's a little hard. I made sure that he didn't like working with me. So that he wouldn't say, oh, well, put me with Dutch. I didn't need a job that bad, but he is undoubtedly one of the worst professional wrestlers God ever created. And I don't think God created him. I think the devil created him, because I think he invented him to put a curse on the rest of us for some reason. He never drew any money. I remember one time somehow they put him against Harley Race for the NWA title in Nashville. And they did like half a house in Nashville. The house, the building would probably seat about 1,000, maybe. I bet they had about 300 people there for the World Championship. Because nobody thought that George was going to be world champion. That'd be a slap in the face. And finally, one guy, they was outside the ring fighting, and one guy attacked George, a fan. You ever hear this story?
Vaguely, I don't know how it goes.
The fan attacked George, and Harley Race had to pull the fan off and knock him out. And they took it back in the ring, and it was horrible. It was embarrassing. It really was. Now, Greg is bad enough, because not only he wasn't even as big as George, but I heard that he was uncoordinated. I'm not very familiar with Greg. I didn't want to be, but can you imagine George Goulas and Greg Gagne as the world's worst tag team? I would actually go see that.
I would, yeah. That'd be an instant sellout for me. I wanted to see how bad it goes, like an Ed Wood film, Plan 9 from Outer Space. Let's see how big a disaster we can make.
Now, you bring up Ed Wood. I love Ed Wood.
Oh, really?
Well, I know who he is. He called up to get financing for a film. And for the ones that don't know who Ed Wood was, he's the world's worst director and producer in Hollywood. He made horrible, like monster films. But he called up to get financing for a movie he wanted to make. And they said, but your last movie was horrible. He said, yes, but the next one will be better. He was always the world's biggest optimist. Like, it can't be any worse. It'll be so much better. So, and the movie, I like the movie. Yeah. Wasn't a George Animal still in that?
He was playing like Tor. I can't remember the real guy's name. I can't remember who played Bela Lugosi in it either, but I do remember that film. The best bit in that for me is, Sarah Jessica Parker, she was in Sex and the City.
Yeah.
And she's in it just at the beginning, and they're reading the reviews of like some terrible like stage play they were in, and she's just reading the review with like horror in her face, and she just looks up at the camera and goes, do I really have a face like a horse? And it's like, it's like, yes, you do.
Yeah.
Before I forget about George Goulas, I want to bring a couple more things just about his appearance. And one, he's got the sorriest chest hair I may have ever seen on a wrestler. He should have just shaved it. And two,
Yeah.
he had the face of a late-night talk show host, like a Dick Cavett or something like that. It was like just nothing about him just screamed, wrestler at all.
Nothing. And his interview sucked. He couldn't even been a late night host because his voice would turn you off. I mean, and he was the guy that got arrested twice. I think we did an email one time, and I told you that he got arrested 3 times for solicitation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was 3 times. I think it was twice. And the same day by the same cop. And solicitation means that you're out looking for prostitutes. And he got caught twice by the same undercover cop. I guess the last one that busted him, which was a lady, I think. And he went back to that same lady. He must have liked her. And they got him again. Now, that's stupid. That is stupid.
I've just pulled up what you sent me. So it says, George Goulas was the son of famed Nashville. We know who he is. A local newspaper headline read, local wrestler arrested for soliciting. George Goulas was arrested for allegedly soliciting a prostitute in the Nashville area the very next week. The same local newspaper headline read, local wrestler arrested again. Goulas was arrested for a second time for solicitation of a prostitute. Goulas was arrested in the same area by the exact same cop.
Yeah. Well, I said twice in the same day, but it was a week between them. But that explains his damn mental attitude. He was an idiot too. and I'm not talking behind his back. And I never like to talk bad about people. I don't. But George kind of warrants it because he's never drew a dime, and I never known many people that kind of liked him. And Bobby Eaton got hung up one time because they put George as his partner. And he had to go with that for I don't know, at least a year. He hated every time he went out there with George.
Yeah, the jet set, wasn't it?
The jet set. Oh, I used to go by Bobby and I said, hey, jet set.
We the people.
The first one is from the Blackadder. Who were your favourite TNA knockouts to work with during your time with the company? And I thought this would be a great jumping off point. I gave you some homework before we went on the air to name your Dutch's top 5 best TNA knockouts ever. And we'll start with number 5, who I will refresh your memory. You said Roxy and Jackie.
Roxy and Jackie, but let me preface this by saying the knockouts was my idea. And if I expressed how they got started, I brought it up one day that we need some girls, and it wasn't met with 100% approval. I don't know why. Vince Russo, he didn't say yay or he didn't say nay. Jeff Jarrett, he looked at me like I had 2 heads. Dixie Carter, she never said one way or the other, but I said, guys, we need something. We can only do so much wrestling with guys. Let's do it with the girls. And we brought the girls in, and nobody wanted to touch them except me. So I took them as my project, which I wanted to do anyway. And I set the girls down the first time we had them at an Impact taping. And I said, girls, you're no longer whores. Can I say that word? You're no longer bitches. You're no longer sluts. From this point on, you're athletes. And I want you to go out there. And I said, I want you to put these guys to shame. And they liked that. And they all pulled together, worked together. And I've often heard that you get a bunch of women together, you could have a lot of drama, which is true. But I had no drama out of these girls. They were just so glad to be a part of something. And I told them, I said, this is going to be big. And I was the only one that believed it. The only one. So I took these girls, and I probably had about 30 maybe that I had there, and more came later. But the ones that I liked the best, and I'd put them in the number 5, was Roxy and Jackie Moore.
Oh, this is Roxy Laveau, isn't it?
And me and Road Dogg gave them that name. We wanted her to be like, just a gimmick was like she's from the swamps of Louisiana. She could put a curse on you. But we didn't take the gimmick into the ring. We just left it outside. That's where it should be. And she went in there and she just kicked ass. She'd do anything you wanted her to do, work her butt off. I mean, those matches really, really look legitimate, as legitimate as you can go. And that's what I liked about her. She worked hard and wasn't hard to get along with. Of course, I don't mind the not getting along with somebody if they can do the job and do it correctly. But she was easy to get along with too. And she had based her life around wrestling and wanted to do it. But, you know, I think something about wrestling that people don't really know is you only got a limited number of years you can do it. I mean, your body will give out. You can't go in there night after night after night after night and do a wrestling match in front of 1,000 fans or 2,000 fans, or because your body will wear out. But Roxy was probably one of the toughest girls we had there, and she did well. And I'm gonna put her in the number 5 spot out of about 30. The other girl that I had to have her on this list was Jackie Moore. And I knew that girl from Memphis. She was one tough woman. She'd go in there and get these girls and just tie them up. And she was shorter, but she was feisty. And if you wanted to fight, she was okay with that too, because she would get down in the dirt with them. I mean, we didn't have that problem, but she was good. A great talent to have, and I like Jackie because I knew her a long time, and she'd do anything you want to do. That's the type of people I like to work with. That's what football coaches like, or basketball coaches. She would put the effort in and the time to get there.
Do you want me to give you the name of number 4, or can you? Because you don't have the list in front of you, but I do.
I can remember it.
Okay, so number 4
was. She goes by Chelsea Green now, and she was Laura Van Ness. And we did a deal with her, and why I picked her is beautiful girl and easy to talk to, beautiful smile. You know, you just felt good being around her. And so we had a wedding, and this other girl was going to be in the wedding, and Laura Van Ness was like one of the bridesmaids. But the husband really liked her, and we let this, I don't know, I just got there when they was doing it. But the wedding between the two we had planned didn't work out. And so the husband-to-be said he loved another girl, and it was Laura Van Ness. Oh, no, he left Laura Van Ness standing there, and he took another girl. And I remember we did a vignette after the show. She was still in her dressing gown and crying. You know, she was distraught. And then the next week, she was still in her dressing gown. And we kept her in the gown for like 2 months. And then she would mess her makeup on her face, and it got over. People loved this girl. And she had actually a really nice look, even messed up. She really had a nice look, and people really, really liked her. And I forgot what happened, but I think I started getting heat from somewhere, like we need to get her out of the dress and dress her up. And I told them, I said, well, as soon as you dress her up, she just like all the other girls. She just like them. She's not distraught anymore. And she gave great interviews. And she's married now to, what's his name?
Matt Cardona, the lucky boy.
Matt Cardona. And she's really a good girl, and I love working with her. So I put her to the number 4 spot of the all-time TNA knockouts.
Mm-hmm. And I'm superfluous here. All I get to say is number 3.
Number 3, and this is a tag team, I'm going to put in there. It's the Beautiful People. It was Velvet Sky and Angelina Love. They were the Beautiful People. And they kind of put this gimmick together themselves and presented it to us, and we use it. And they did great interviews. Angelina Love can talk. They did great interviews, and they were very, very easy to get along and easy to get heat on. I mean, people just didn't like them because they were such snotty, snooty girls, and they were great to work with. I actually enjoyed my time at TNA, working with the Knockouts. If I had to do that for the rest of my career, it'd be like a piece of cake. But you know where I got a lot of my ideas for these Knockouts?
No, I don't.
From the what was the show that used to be on with the girls? I'll have it in a minute. It was an all wrestling show, just with girls.
Wow. Not Wow.
Women
Glow.
in wrestling.
Glow.
God. And I'd watch that show, and the wrestling was the craps. It was, but I liked the show. And they would do all these, and then they come out with documentaries about Glow, which I was a fan of, but I just liked the show. So I took a lot of those ideas that I had for that show and put them in this one. I took the goofy ones out, and I made them athletes, and the people started believing it. Number 2, which is almost it could be number 1. But number 2 was Gail Kim. Gail Kim was a leader amongst that locker room, a real leader. And the other girl, I'm going to put number 1, I'm going to jump to it, was Awesome Kong. So, and Awesome Kong came about because I told Gail that I was going to start an all-women division. Oh, she got all giddy because she wanted to wrestle. She was running around managing somebody. Jeff Jarrett.
American AMW, America's Most Wanted, she was managing at one point.
And she was with them too.
Yeah.
But we weren't making proper use of her talents. And I'd expressed that to her several times. And I told her that I'm going to try to get an all women's division, which she liked. She loved it. So finally, when I got it okayed, I told her, I said, I need some girls. Who you got? And she said, I got this girl in Japan right now. Here's a tape on her. She gave it to me. It was Awesome Kong. So she gave me that, and I started watching it, and I went home and I watched it. Excuse me, now I'm coughing. This girl, if you didn't know that it was a wrestling match, you'd think it was a shoot. I mean, they were just beating the living crap out of each other. And I saw the tape, and I saw the Gail the next TV, or actually the next day, I think. She said, what do you think? I said, I want her. She said, when? I said, yesterday. I said, let's get her here as quick as we can. Let's get her name on a piece of paper. So we did. And it took me about 3 months, maybe a little more. But I worked this angle between Gail and Kong. And we finally went to a main event. And we did a main event with the girls long time before WWE did. And we did a rating, which was paltry then by WWE standards. But for TNA standards, we didn't double, but we did about 30 or 40% better. We did a 3.4, which was over, I think it's 2.5 million people then. And we never even come close to that. But it was for a knockout match. And it was Gail and Kong, and they had as Jim Ross would say, a slobber knocker. Because they beat the living crap out of each other all over that arena. And I was proud of them. And I think that still stands for the highest rating in TNA history. The only one that beat it was Hogan's first appearance in TNA. That's the only one that beat it. They did a 3.4. If it had been 2 or 3 more points higher, it would have, and they go it to the finest, the nearest 10th point, it would have done a 3.5, which that's just for bragging rights, but it was a very, very good match.
What gives Awesome Kong the #1 spot and not Gail Kim?
Because she had a lot of, well, she's bigger and she's more, I mean, if Kong was standing on the street and she stood her ground, I think a lot of men would say they would be kind of leery about taking her on in an actual fist fight, because she's trained in MMA too, and the strikes and the back fists and all this. She's tough. She is really, really tough. And I think why I gave her the #1 spot is not because she didn't have more experience than Gail, but she had trained in Japan. So she could back up what she said. Because this girl her and Gail liked her and wanted to work with her. And I think that helped their matches. Kong was tough. She was smart. And I just liked her. And she could do the job.
We the people.
Give me one more way that somebody could sandbag a finish then, if you've got an example.
Well, I saw a guy in Puerto Rico one time. He went out and he's working with Abyss. You know who Abyss is?
Yep.
Chris Hart, great guy. And he had a habit of like laying around and playing when you were getting heat on him. And I told him, I said, come here. I said, if that son of a bitch tonight, if he lays down on you, I want you to beat the living shit out of him. And he's a nice guy. He didn't want to do it. I said, let me tell you something. What he's doing is not only hurting the business, he's hurting you. Because if he is not going to sell you 340 pounds, if he's not going to sell you and make you look like a joke, not only does he make the business look like a joke, he makes you look like a joke. I said, so if you look back here and I got my arms closed, he says, if you don't beat the crap out of him, you can pack your bag tonight. He said, oh man. I kind of had to laugh at him. He didn't want to do it, but he got in the ring, and exactly like I predicted, he started sandbagging him. Like he takes a big slam and he gets up and he would just shake it off like he's playing with it. My arms crossed. And he looked back there and I said, now. And he didn't do it right away, but he did it the next move. Then Abyss got pissed off on his own and did beat the crap out of him. And he come back and I said, there you go. I said, when you got rough with him, he started selling, right? He said, yeah. Because sometimes you got to wake him up. I mean, I couldn't wake him up because the guy would, if he'd done it with me, I'd have to go another route with it. But Abyss was big enough to really kind of hurt him. So he gave him a couple of good shots, and the guy and told him, he said, you better sell this. And he started selling. That's sandbagging.
Fine example.
And green guys, they think it's just part of working, but it's not. Experienced guys can tell that.
We the people.
Well, let's go to our first question. And this question is from Dutch Mantell. There was an incident on live TV in Memphis, USWA, where Billy Joe Travis was arrested for non-payment of child support and placed under arrest, put in handcuffs, put in a patrol car, and driven away, most of it on live TV. And I did a tiny bit more research. Apparently his manager is called Luther Biggs. I watched it. He's chasing after Billy Joe Travis saying, I'm going to get you the best lawyer. And it looks actually like it's all staged. It looks like it's but it was real.
No, it's real. So I'm there one day in Memphis, and we had to get there about 10 o'clock in the morning. The show started live at 11, and about 11:30, and I think it was, before 12, 4 deputies and four cops came into the back at Channel 5 WMC in Memphis. And Lawler he's in the back. He wasn't, I don't know, I guess he was on the show that day. But Lawler went up to him and says, "You guys need something?" They said, "Yeah, we're looking for Billy Travis. He here?" He said, "Yeah, he's here." He said, "Why?" He said, "Well, we're here to arrest him." "What? For what?" "Non-payment of child support." Now, you got to know Billy a little bit. Billy, if he had been 30 pounds bigger and probably 2 inches taller, would have been a huge star in WWE. He was a heat-getting son of a bitch. He could walk to the ring and you feel like getting up and punching him out because he just had the mannerisms to make you just mad enough to get you to stand up. And if he'd have had a little more size to him, Vince could have taken him and he could have been a big star. So anyway, Lawler was trying to tell him, he said, "Guys, listen, anyway, we can do this little segment here and then then you arrest him." Nope, we got to get him now if he's here. And he said, "Well, I don't want you to get him here." He said, "Well, we're going to." So they went up to him. And then Lawler said, "Well, I got to show he's here." So he called the camera into the back. He said, "Get this." And he told Lance on the headphone, "Well, he's been arrested. I don't know what for, but we got to show this." And they showed Billy Travis getting arrested on live TV and taken out of, it's on YouTube, taken out of the studio to the cars. And he had a manager named Luther Biggs. And Luther Biggs, he was out there, "Don't you worry, Billy. I'll get you the greatest lawyer. I'll get you F. Lee Bailey. I'll get you," I forgot another lawyer that he represented O.J. Simpson. "I'll get you him. We'll get you out of this trumped up charges." And I've never seen anything like that. Guess what? And I probably never will see it again. But for a wrestler to get arrested for a shoot on live TV, and they didn't want Lawler filming it. They didn't want the station filming it. And Lawler said, "Well, I don't know what to tell you. We got a show running here, so I'm going to tape it."
Private property.
Well, yeah, but they can't do anything about it because the station, if it was on their property, like you said, they can do whatever they want. They're doing a show anyway. And if it was outside, yeah, anybody could tape it outside. It's public property. So anyway, they showed that. But I felt sorry for Billy because Billy got around a little bit with a lot of different young girls. I'm just glad the girl wasn't underage or something, but she'd had a baby and he stopped paying his child support. And so she called him, they said, "Do you know where he is?" She said, "No, but but I know where he'll be Saturday morning about 11:30. They said, "Where?" He said, "He'll be at Channel 5. Okay, let's go get him. And they did.
How did he punish him? Do you know, or did you ever get the sort of like end of that story?
No, they let him out on bail. And then he took care of it. He took care of it on his own time, but all he had to do was catch the child support payments up. And I guess he did that because I never heard any more about it.
WP, not so much a question. I just want to hear any stories he has about Carl Gotch.
Carl Gotch was way, way before my time. My relationship with Carl Gotch I just heard stories secondhand, never met him. But I do know that he didn't like the wrestling that he called modern day wrestling. And that modern day wrestling was back in the 70s. He didn't like that. He didn't like Ric Flair. He didn't like any of those guys who actually put show business in it. He didn't like that because if it wasn't his style, he didn't understand it. But Carl Gotch was a great what we call shooters and hookers. And I think you asked me who was the toughest guy in professional wrestling I ever met. Did you ask me that?
I don't think so. I may not have done. Someone tell me if I did, but I don't think so.
Okay, well, I'll get back to it. But back in those days, you had a couple of shooters, Jim Londos, not even a big guy. He's like 180 pounds, but he knew how to wrestle. And another guy was called John Foley, which was an Englishman. You ever hear about him?
Yes. Was he? Did he go to Stampede at one point? Or was that J.R. Foley, a different man?
No, I was his partner one time. We went to actually a territory named Knoxville. We were up there, and John, 1,000 jokes and 1,000 ways to tie you up. I remember a guy, a promoter that John was working for, and John, he would smoke all the time, but cigarettes instead of cigar. And he'd have a mark come up, a fan saying, I could beat this wrestler. He said, okay. He said, I'll give you a try. If you do, I'll let you in the business. Oh, okay. He'd line up 5 guys, but he'd line up the muscle guys. Well, he didn't want to have nothing to do with them, the fan. He'd pick John, smoking a cigarette. I'll take him. Okay. That's the worst pick he could have made. Oh my God. John would go in the ring and he'd tie the guy up and some of them cried, literally cried to be let out of the ring. And the promoter says, well, I give you a shot and you can't even beat the least of these guys. So you do me no good. But there's been a lot of tough guys in wrestling, a lot. But a lot of guys aren't tough in wrestling. They're just tough in fighting. They just know, and they got to be big. I'll tell you a guy, and Brody was tough. Hanson was tough. Abdullah, because, 400 pounds don't want to move, you ain't going to move him. And he had no neck. He just got to duck his head like this. You can't knock him out. You may cut him up a little bit, and that's about it. Haku was probably, I heard, Haku was probably the toughest guy, wrestler, but not in wrestling, just in literal fighting. And I've heard that from a lot of people. So if Haku walks in a room, show him a lot of respect.
I'll give you this one then. John Foley or Danny Hodge?
Oh, I think Danny Hodge. Danny Hodge he was amateur trained, but he knew how to hook. And some of those moves they had they can actually pull your arm out of socket or knee or anything like that. But Danny Hodge legitimately was one of the toughest guys I've ever known, because he was known for the hand grip. First time I met Danny Hodge, I put my hand out and he was smiling the whole time. How you doing, kid? How you doing, kid? I went, yeah, fine, glad to meet you. And he just clamped down on my hand. And now I'm trying to fight back, but he just got stronger. It was like a vice. And finally I got to the point, I almost went to my knees and he said, I'm just kidding you, and slapped me on the back and laughed. But he was the guy who used to go to the ring. He would take an apple and he would squeeze it and you could see the juice come out of the apple. So that's how tough he was. Danny Hodge was tough, really, really tough.